Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dani Rizzo. I'm the Digital Director at the Humane Rescue Alliance. And today we're really thrilled to be talking to you all about all things virtual adoption. We're going to be talking a lot about some of our lessons learned as we shifted from in-person adoptions to virtual adoptions. We'll be breaking down the virtual adoption rollout process, and specifically how we were able to essentially mobilize our foster program to provide really critical support for this effort, and sort of the initial process our adoption team used to move online. And then thirdly, how we were really able to communicate that change to our many stakeholders, and most importantly, to the public. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Jennah and Ashley. So Jennah is our Director of Foster Programs, and Ashley Valm is our Director of Adoptions. They're going to be kind of detailing how each of their teams were able to kind of handle this COVID crisis and really roll out a really successful virtual adoption program in the last few weeks. All right, so let's get started, and I will hand it over to Jennah.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. My name is Jennah, and let's see, I've been working with HRA for about 7 years, and about 6 of those years in various roles in foster land. So I will get things started by talking about kind of the top 5 reasons or structures that we had in place that kind of really helped us mobilize virtual adoptions quickly. We had a swift onboarding process for our fosters. We have matching and tracking tools. We have robust volunteers that help us with our foster program. We have a really great communication infrastructure, and the adoption process was already built into fostering. So let's talk about our onboarding process. When we realized that we were going to need to move, well, let me back up a little bit. When we realized that we really needed to implement social distancing, we decided to change our onboarding process of foster parents. And so before COVID-19, it was they had to sign up online, attend an online orientation, come on site to do an animal care orientation, and then sign up to be matched with the foster, which could take a couple weeks to a month to get through the whole process. And we had been really wanting to get rid of the barrier of having to come on site for online orientation anyway, so this really motivated us to make that change. So we just took out the animal care orientation. And so people who wanted to help us by fostering, all they had to do was sign up online, do an online orientation, and then they were able to be signed up to be matched with a foster. And that reduced our onboarding process to a couple of weeks, just to a couple of days. And we had a huge influx of applications coming in. So that took us a little bit longer to get through those, but now we're in more of a groove, and it really only takes us a day or two for people to get through saying, yes, I want to help, and them learning about our fostering process and signing up to help. But what this allowed us to do too was, when we realized all of our animals really, especially our adoptable animals, had to go off-site, we had people in place ready to take those animals because we were able to move them through very quickly and get them to the stage of foster. And the next thing that really helped us was having tools in place to help us capture what animals needed to be placed in foster, what homes we had available, and then we were able to track matches once they left the building for foster care. So one of those tools we call a candidate sheet, and that allows everybody on the foster team to, in real time, collect information about animals that need to be placed in foster, and then our ability to complete the steps to get them ready to go out the door, steps like up to date on vaccines, microchips, stuff like that. Then we have our foster sign up on deck, which essentially is a spreadsheet that captures their date of availability, what's going on in their household, kids, other animals, and then the types of animals they're willing to foster, large adult dogs, tiny neonates, all of that stuff is captured. And then our coordinators really just need to cross-reference those to make matches. And then once the animals leave, we have case managers, and I'll talk about the volunteers in just a second, but the case managers are the main support system for our foster parents. So even though we knew we had a lot of new fosters helping us with animals that we typically didn't send into foster with a new process that we had in place, we knew our volunteers would be able to support those foster parents through the process so that it was smooth for all of the people and all of the animals involved. We have developed at HRA a toolkit that has a candidate sheet, and a foster on deck sheet, and a case management sheet. And you can access that by going to our website, humanerescuealliance.org/foster matchmaker. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's my cat, Wonder Woman. And then our next critical infrastructure that we had in place are volunteers. We have about 20 to 25 program volunteers who help us with everything from processing our foster applications. When people sign up on deck, they get an email from us that says, thanks for signing up on deck, and here's some information you need to know before you're matched with an animal. People to help us prepare supplies to send animals out into foster. And then the most crucial group of volunteers are our case managers. And they basically serve as hand holders and holders of accountability for our foster parents. And we basically group those guys by area of expertise. So we have folks that support our dog fosters and people who support neonatal kittens and small animals. And what we did when we started virtual adoptions is we added 4 new case managers, and we actually used staff from other departments who were being underutilized during when we moved most of our operations off-site, and they became adoption specialists. So we only assigned them animals that were 100% ready for adoption, and they helped the foster parents strategize, figure out how to respond to a high volume of interest, because most of our foster parents are getting lots and lots of interest in their animals, and that can be overwhelming to deal with. So our case managers are there to kind of help them with that, and then any other questions that they might have about fostering. Let's see. Now, how did we help our fosters understand what was going on, why it was going on, and how they could help? So we already established a communication infrastructure, and the first thing that we do with our foster parents is we set expectations. So they know if they are a part of the HRA foster program, how things are going to work and what we expect of them. And that starts from the time they sign up all the way through picking up an animal and then fostering an animal for us. Our program is a little bit unique because we ask foster parents to allow us to match them with an animal. We don't typically let them choose an animal. They can certainly indicate a preference for an animal, but if it's not a good match for them, we'll suggest another animal. And they have to be available when they say they are available to come and pick up an animal, and we ask that they do that within 24 hours. So we start prepping them for that and reminding them of that all along the way, so they know and they are ready to come get that animal when we say it's ready to leave our front doors. And then we use 2 other communication structures, which are Google Groups and Facebook Groups. So Google Groups, everybody who fosters for us is required to be a member of the Google Groups. We use that to communicate broadly to our foster parents, and that's the primary tool that we use to say, hey guys, here's some changes that are coming down the chute, want to let you know we're moving to virtual meet and greets, here's how it works. And then the other aspect of the Google Groups is it allows our foster parents to be a community with one another because they can communicate back and forth. Does it always work really great? Sometimes people don't quite understand that they're communicating with like thousands of other people and they hit the reply all button a little bit too much. But so there was certainly a learning curve for our new foster parents with that, and our more experienced foster parents getting a little annoyed with that. But things have really smoothed out with some moderation and a little bit of weekly nudging about the use of the appropriate use of the groups. And then we also used Facebook groups. Facebook is not required, but it is another tool. It's great because it's so visual and interactive. And again, it creates a community for our foster parents to be able to ask questions of each other and ask for support when needed. And so that's been really great because our experienced foster parents have been really helpful in helping people who don't have a case manager yet because they haven't been matched with an animal understand process, procedures, how things work. So those were our two main vehicles for helping people understand the changes that were coming. And we basically had daily communications about the changes and then tips and tricks and just general information about fostering. We also have standardized individual communication for those routine things that we do, like matching people with animals when they're assigned a case manager, so that our case managers and our staff basically have to cut, paste, customize a couple things, and we're ensuring that we have really efficient ways to communicate, that everybody is kind of getting the same information. And we built into that communication like kind of the common things that are asked often when someone's matched or when they bring a new foster animal home. So that kind of helped reduce the number of back and forth so that our staff actually had time to spend matching animals and moving animals out the front door. And the last thing that we did was we built a website for our foster parents so that they would have a kind of a one-stop reference point to answer their questions. And we made sure that that website had information about all of our new processes, especially our adoption process and how that worked for them. And then the fifth thing was part of being a foster for HRA means that you not only are going to provide care for an animal, but you are going to serve as an adoption advocate. And so that means that there's a built-in expectation that once that animal is ready to be adopted, you are taking really great photos and doing really cute videos and writing a great bio, and you are promoting that animal to be adopted. You're being responsive to potential adopters and showing that animal to potential adopters. So really all we needed to do was tweak how they showed potential adopters their animals. And so we gave them kind of guidelines for how they could do meet and greets. And basically we just said, set up something like a FaceTime meeting and show off your really cute kitten or your puppy or whoever you're fostering and have a conversation with that potential adopter about what it's like to live with that animal. And then you will send that potential adopter, if they would like to adopt your foster, a link to our adoption questionnaire. And then our adoption team takes it from there and does counseling and completes the adoption. But there were very little changes because we already had this built into what we expected of our foster parents. So that's it for my part of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. So want to talk through kind of what we kind of went through as our sort of first steps when we realized that we were going to need to make this shift quickly. And then we'll talk a bit about how our process works and then some other factors that you might want to keep in mind as you try to get your own processes off the ground or troubleshoot any issues that you're having with the processes that you've created. So when we were getting started, kind of one of the first pieces was making sure that all of our staff had the inventory that they needed in home to get these things moving. So, you know, do our adoption counselor staff Or if you're using volunteers, do those volunteers have a laptop at home that has a camera installed? Do they have internet that's reliable? Do they have unlimited minutes on their cell phones? And if not, how are we going to get that equipment to them in a way that's safe for everyone and works well? We also needed to think about who our internal stakeholders were and whether they were going to be able to support this effort. So luckily at HRA, our culture is such that, we're able to be flexible and innovative and move in the directions that we need to move in and feel like we have the support of our team on our side. Our volunteers are used to us being on kind of the front edge of some of these things. And so we knew that going into this, we would have broad support for the efforts that we were making. But if you're anticipating that being a problem, getting ahead of that by kind of creating some messaging around it and making sure that you're all on the same page is really important. And whatever communication that needs to happen on the front end, may want to kind of prioritize that. We need to move all of our contracts online and any other paperwork that historically went into a folder and got handed to an adopter. So we found some online software tools that did that for us and kind of got that all preloaded before we launched this thing. Communicating our changes ahead of time, so both internally and externally, right? So emails, making sure that your voicemail grading is changed and accurate, getting out to news media outlets about these changes, posting on a blog, posting on social media, so that all of your stakeholders, your volunteers, adopters, the general public, everyone is aware that these changes are going to be happening. Making sure that your homepage on your website indicates some kind of change. So if people are coming looking for an animal, they're not getting 4 pages in before they realize that they can't come to the shelter, is all really important. And then making sure to stay connected with your staff, your volunteers, and your adopters. So we'll talk a bit about this in a minute, but one of the primary ways that we've stayed connected in our adoptions department is by doing a daily huddle meeting on Teams, so we can all see each other's faces and have some time for kind of interpersonal connection and updates and those questions that come up that somebody might not necessarily send an email about, but once we're all in the same sort of room together, we can have those conversations. So our virtual adoption process, we created some tracking documents and a process document that have been really helpful for keeping everyone on the same page, both in our department and more broadly in the organization. We got our questionnaire online, and that has a back sheet that we'll look at in a moment. And then we also created an altered animals waiver for adopters who are going to be taking home animals that will be spayed and neutered in the future. So we can look at that internal process document first, and these will all be shared after the presentation as well. And you're welcome to take those and use them however you like. This, I'm happy to have everyone able to kind of take this stuff and run with it. So if something similar to this works for you, great. If not, we're going to share this in a way that you can just copy and paste it into a document and edit to your heart's content. So this is our document just with like passwords and personal information taken out of it, so you can really see how this works. So we created our remote adoptions logbook, which we'll look at briefly. We're doing daily Zoom meetings. Adopter support is happening from home with people's work cell phones. So we're logging into our voicemails and checking those remotely. Our phone numbers are all now being forwarded to work cell phones during work hours so that we can answer calls as they come in rather than having them all come to voicemail and be returned. And that was actually surprisingly a simple process. I thought it was going to be much more complicated than it was, and we can talk about that later if folks are interested. The photos and bios, the foster pieces were all already sort of in place. And then the meet and greet stuff actually was relatively in place as well. We just needed to kind of switch it to virtual meet and greets as opposed to in person. But the process was something that the fosters and the staff were already things were already in line. So we had to create that online adoption questionnaire and get that rolling, but kind of kept everything kind of in the same chronological order that it would have been otherwise. As far as scheduling adoption counseling appointments, this is where I really started to flesh it out for our counselor staff so that they could use this as a kind of step-by-step. If they're like overwhelmed by the changes, don't know what to do next, they can come back and look at this and really follow step-by-step through the process, that you're going to be calling the adopter, scheduling that consultation, confirming certain things, and then, going on from there. We, again, as we move down, have similar kind of step-by-step instructions for the remote counseling and outcomes, with all the login information, all the passwords are in there, little notes for, okay, if there's a special circumstance, here's what you do. And a lot of this we had to add in as we went. So this is a live document on our SharePoint, or if you use Google Docs or something like that, rather than making it a PDF, keep it in that form and have that link sent out so that as you add things in or subtract or have to change things, everyone's going to have the same up-to-date version, because a lot of these pieces were not in my original document, and we were having, as questions came up, we said, okay, here's another paragraph to stick in here for reference. So as we go down, you'll see, there's a lot of this stuff, and it's all just, here's what you do if this happens, here's what you do next. And that's pretty much, it's just, step by step as you go. Okay, so this was shared with our most of our operations team, especially operations leadership, so that they had, as questions were coming up in their minds, wait, how are they going to do this, right? They could just refer to this document rather than having all those questions being asked, or having people feel really uncertain about whether we really understood what we were trying to do here. That they could come to this document and say, wow, they really thought this stuff through. I think we're good here. Okay, so this really helps with buy-in as well. Looking at the remote adoptions logbook. So this is really has been a crucial tool, particularly for me, really selfishly, to be able to get a nice snapshot of where all of the adopters are in their process, where our counselors are in their pieces of a process, and what that looks like, kind of what next steps are, if things are moving along. So this is, we have all of the animals that have sent in questionnaire, the adopters that have sent in questionnaires, those animals are all entered into this document as soon as a questionnaire is sent in. And then we have kind of these columns for kind of each step that needs to take place to get an animal all the way through to outcome, passed off to their adopter, on somebody's couch, and we don't have to worry about them anymore. So you can kind of see as we go, the counselors are filling in as they complete all these steps, and then we've got some spaces for kind of comments that, here's where we are in the process, or here's a weird thing that's happening that we need to wait on. And that way, when we're doing our morning meeting every morning, we can all sort of look at this and go, wait, what's going on with this? Here's a question that needs to be answered. Or we can look and say, you know what, Mary called in sick yesterday. I think she might not be in again today, so someone's going to need to take over this counseling session. And look, we already know that we need to start with sending that adoption contract to that adopter, right? So that makes it really simple for us to all be on the same page, even though we're not together, know where things are at, and move forward together. It also makes it really easy to see, like, is someone taking on too much? Is someone sort of not busy enough and feeling bored in their day? We've had a lot of our counselors have been really great and are kind of jumping in and saying, hey, I don't have enough to do. Like, it looks like you've got a lot of follow-up calls to make. Can I take on some of those for you? So that's really helped also with just keeping everybody connected, and kind of keeping that workplace culture of everyone helping each other and teamwork together while we're all kind of in our own homes and separated. So this has been crucial for us. And again, this will be sent out and posted in a way that you guys can just take it and run with it, and do whatever you want. So the next thing I wanted to take a look at was our adoption questionnaire. So we put this on just a Google form. And this is the link that we send to adopters. So after the animal is in their foster home and available for adoption, the fosters will get these inquiries from potential adopters. They do a virtual meet and greet. And then once the adopter has met the animal, either, well, at this point virtually, the foster will send this link to the adopter to actually apply for adoption for the animal. We had to add in some instructions up at the top to make sure that everyone was on the same page, that we've met the animal, completed the And then the next step will be completing the virtual counseling, right? So it's all laid out there. But then essentially it just loaded in all of our questionnaire questions, right? So this is all relatively straightforward, standard stuff that is going to allow our counselors to have the information they need to do the counseling sessions. We're not screening anybody out with these questions. It's just gathering the information we need to be prepared for a counseling session. And then if we go over to the next tab, so all of this backfills into a spreadsheet that we then use to see who has applied for an animal and kind of what next steps are. So every morning we're looking at this and saying, oh, okay, so-and-so has applied for adoption. So we need to put that on our logbook. And once it's on the logbook, counselor gets assigned and they're off and running. So this is really just a quick tool that we're using to see who has applied and have access to the questionnaire answers. So those are the primary documents that we're using. The combination of those things, along with our contracts and stuff that we got loaded online, is pretty much it. It's pretty basic. Once you have those tools in place, it's just kind of getting them loaded in and getting everybody on the same page about how it's all going to work, and then kind of rolling and running with that. Again, our unaltered animals waiver is something that we'll post. It's not anything exciting, but it is important to make sure that you have kind of documentation that your adopters have acknowledged that their animal is unaltered, and kind of what next steps are going to be for that. We also have some handouts for adopters for kind of what to expect from having an unaltered animal. We'll post those as well. So, you know, for example, that if you have an unaltered female dog, that they may go into heat, and this is what that looks like and what to expect. So really important to make sure that the adopters are aware that, you know, might not be exactly the same as having an altered animal, and what to expect there. So just a few numbers about kind of how virtual adoptions have been going for us. We've been doing them for almost a month now, and have done over 150 adoptions, which is amazing. We've had a lot of adopter interest. That has not gone away. We would have more adoptions, except our intake has slowed down considerably. But as you can see, our turnaround has been really fast. So animals have been going out to foster, thanks to Jennah and her team, very quickly after they're brought in. And then almost as soon as they're available for adoption, some of these animals are getting out to an adopter home so quickly that our fosters are occasionally a little upset that they didn't get to spend more time with their foster animal, which is, you know, sad for the foster, but a great problem to have. Our adopters are really interested in adopting at this time. And so, you know, this process that we put in place moves relatively quickly still, so that we're not creating too much lag time in our normal processes. And then the one that I really wanted to highlight here is not to be scared of returns. So we ran these numbers again just last week to kind of look at, you know, since we started virtual adoptions, has our return rate increased? Because I was getting this question a lot from people who are trying to launch their own programs, and stakeholders in their organization were saying, I don't think this is going to work. I think we're going to get a lot of returns. Our return rate right now for virtual adoptions is 5.6%. Our return rate in 2019 for the same time period was 5.3%, which is essentially the same number. So we are actually not seeing any increase at all in our return rate for virtual adoptions, which is amazing. I really expected that number to go up at least a little bit. And looking at the returns that we've had, the reasons are relatively similar to what we had before. So what that tells us is that this process is working well for adopters, that they feel like they are getting to know their animals in a similar way through the virtual adoption process. I think, you know, getting to talk to the foster of an animal is a really huge deal, that they get to kind of talk to somebody who's gotten to know that animal in their home. I think is making a really big difference for these adopters, even though they can't put their hands on them. They're getting to know their animal and deciding who they want to adopt that way, and that's really great to see that that's working really well for us. And hopefully that can reassure your team that that it'll work well for you as well.
Right, so as Ashley mentioned, communication to our internal and external stakeholders has really been vital to the kind of critical shift to moving from face-to-face adoptions to virtual adoptions. With the COVID crisis, we were really kind of communicating these closures and changes to our community on what seemed like a daily basis. We knew the move to virtual adoptions would be a big change and wanted to make sure we were extremely clear in our messaging and answering really some of these big questions that we knew everyone would have, which would be, how do I virtually adopt? So we put together a really brief explainer video just talking about how folks can virtually adopt and how we can make it as simple as possible for folks to really understand how this process works. So I'll let you take a look at that. I think we also really wanted to kind of position it as something exciting. We didn't want the messaging to be, we're closed for adoptions, in person. We really wanted it to be kind of like a launch, something really exciting. So we wanted, our messaging was always, we're excited to launch virtual adoptions, not necessarily that we're closed for in-person adoptions. So really thinking about how we could have that kind of positive spin on it and really get our community excited about virtual adoptions and get them excited about being able to make a really big impact and a change and help HRA in this really critical time. We also wanted to show in the video that it's really simple. It didn't really need to be overly complicated. And we wanted to show people visually as well how they can adopt, how they can kind of move through the process, and how it could really work for them. So our first priority before any of that, though, was really communicating this change and the updates to our website. So as Ashley mentioned, we didn't want any of this information to be buried deep on our website. We wanted it to be really clear. And then essentially in the last month, we've seen nearly a 50% increase in traffic to our website. Particularly with our physical locations being closed, our website has been increasingly important. So we worked with Ashley and her team to modify the steps to adoption and the adoptions process, and to make it really crystal clear on our website, and to have all of that information that our potential adopter would need really clear on our website and spelled out as easily as possible for them. We really tried to anticipate a lot of the questions that we had that they might have, and kind of put those together in a frequently asked questions functionality on our website as well. After we kind of had our website in order and made sure all of our operational changes were very clearly identified on the site, we kind of moved on to social, and we were able to kind of create that explainer video. We were able to communicate that messaging in a really positive way, and letting folks know that they can absolutely help us during this time, that bringing home an animal is absolutely possible, and that we were there to kind of walk them through it step by step. We also wanted to use social as an opportunity to really meet people where they are. We weren't able to meet them face-to-face anymore, and so we really were getting quite an increase in questions coming to us through direct message through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we really kind of shifted gears to be community managers and kind of fielding a lot of those questions that we were getting, and either answering what we could or fielding them to our colleagues in foster and adoption. This, I think, was really essential in kind of getting that messaging out there and being really clear across foster, adoption, and communications across all the changes that were happening. The next piece that we kind of went through was thinking about promotion. And so we were really fortunate to have some great relationships with several local media outlets, but we relied on them to kind of help us push this news out beyond our kind of HRA supporter bubble. We were able to continue some of our Pet of the Week segments that we have on local radio and TV stations, doing them virtually by Skype, and then also using our relationships with some of the media outlets here locally to kind of communicate these changes. I think folks are really excited to see that they could still help us, and that there was a lot of excitement around the virtual adoption opportunity. The next thing that we really tried to think about how we could do was to monitor. And so we've been monitoring, keywords on our website. We've seen search terms for things that we never had before a month ago. So people searching for COVID resources or people searching for virtual adoptions. We really wanted to make clear on our website some of those search terms that we knew people would be asking, that we knew people would be typing. We really wanted to make clear some of those words in our copy on our website. So our Google search would kind of recognize those and people would be able to get the answers that they needed. Also kind of doing some usability testing and some user testing. So as we got feedback from adopters and fosters and other supporters and stakeholders, making modifications as we needed to our kind of COVID-19 response page, to our process page for adopters, and again, kind of answering those questions that we kept getting more frequently. And then I guess the last thing really has been kind of communicating that success. So as Ashley mentioned, we've had more than 150 virtual adoptions in the last month, which has been really exciting to see. And so we've really wanted to kind of share some of those great stories with our community. We wanted to let folks know that this has been successful and really share those exciting updates with folks. So we've been kind of sharing the success stories either on social. We've done Instagram takeovers with some of our adopters and some of our fosters. We've been using our foster community, relying on them a lot more heavily because we're not in the shelter every day and able to get really great photos and videos of our adoptable animals. We've been kind of communicating with our fosters, and they've been so wonderful in sending us photos and videos that we can kind of share with our community. It really has been such a great kind of collaborative effort. And, I think kind of celebrating those successes has been a really important piece for us as we kind of think about moving to virtual adoptions and kind of communicating all the changes. There has been some exciting things as well. So we're really excited to think about how we can kind of communicate that impact, really let our community know that they've been making a difference. And I think they're so excited to see some of these wonderful success stories and how we've been able to pivot and kind of move from this face-to-face model to virtual adoptions. So I know we have a few questions that folks had submitted previously, and it looks like we have a few in the chat as well. So we'll take a few and just kind of get started here. So one that we had was, how can we convince our senior leadership to shift to virtual adoptions? And Ashley kind of touched on this a little bit, but Ashley, maybe you want to take this on a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, sure. So I think, I think our leadership even was a little hesitant to close our doors, right? We always want to be open for our community. And I think that, we really pushed in the beginning to try to find a way to keep things safe while continuing to do on-site adoptions so that people who are physically coming to us for help or coming to us because they want an animal wouldn't feel like they were being pushed away. And we made a lot of effort to that effect and found that we just didn't feel super great about the amount of risk that we were taking by inviting members of the public into our building, by inviting them to all sort of come in and commingle if there was a way to do it otherwise. So as we were continuing to do these sort of modified on-site adoptions, I was really starting to have these conversations with leadership about let's really see if we can do this some other way that doesn't involve bringing members of the public into the shelter. So I think really sitting down and having honest conversations about what does this risk look like? If if members of the public are coming into our building, are we potentially exposing them? Are we potentially exposing our staff, or our staff potentially exposing each other? That we have to have more staff in the building, all that. But I think the big piece for convincing senior leadership is putting something together that looks like it'll work, right? I think if we can inspire confidence in them that other folks are doing this, it's working well. Here's how it would look in our environment, right? Kind of putting together even just a bare bones proposal of, if we want to do this, here's how it would work, and here's why it would work, and here's other organizations that have made this work. I think that can be a really powerful tool to convince leadership to move in that direction. I would also say the returns piece is so important. I think even folks who think that they don't have that bias still really fall back on thinking that returns are this enormously huge deal, and that we have to avoid them at all costs. And what we've found at Humane Rescue Alliance is, as we've kind of moved away from close tracking of that number and worrying so much about how to avoid having a return happen, the numbers have sort of decreased because we've been focusing much more on good matchmaking, making sure that our adopters are able to connect with us and with animals and ask questions, and that our process is good. But also sort of feeling like, if an animal is adopted and then returned, we've learned more about that animal in a home environment. We've learned more about that adopter and what their needs and preferences are. So there are some real positives to having an adopter return an animal, right? So if they, return a dog that wasn't getting along with their cat, we can match that dog into a home that doesn't have a cat in it, right? And that dog will be happier, and this adopter will be happier for not having to manage, having two animals that don't get along, right? So then we can find a dog for that adopter who maybe has a home history with cats already, or who we think would be a better fit in that kind of home. So those are I think the key pieces for those kinds of conversations. But I think it's doable.
So I think because because this was something we had to do, right? There was people already feeling uncomfortable about having to have face-to-face interactions with people. This was a very well-supported decision. I don't know if we had just made this decision before the pandemic, if it would have been as well received. I think people would have been really fearful about returns and match quality and all of those things. But we really did not have anybody honestly voice concerns about it. Most people were actually really thankful that we came up with a safe process for them and for potential adopters, which I was honestly a little surprised about, because this is a big shift from going to meeting an animal, putting your hands on an animal, interacting with an animal, to, hi, look at the animal moving on the camera, let me answer any questions you have, right? That's a big shift. But my thought for this was that we already match fosters with animals that they have never met before. And we do that based on what they say they are able to manage and want to take care of in their home. And so this takes things a little bit further, where an adopter actually gets to know the animal and ask questions about the animal and feel comfortable about welcoming that animal into their home, right? So foster matching has been very successful. We have probably an equal return rate that we would see in adoptive homes. And things go as smoothly as they can when you put an animal into someone's home. So I was very pleasantly surprised by how well received this shift was.
If I can add a piece to this question, I think we had, especially in the beginning, and this may be continuing as well, we have adopters occasionally who call us and say, I can't do a virtual meet and greet because I have, two really small kids in my house and I want to adopt a large dog, and I feel like I need to see that dog in person interacting with my kids before I adopt it. Or I need an emotional support animal, so I really need to meet that animal to make sure it's going to be the right fit. And the way that we've responded to some of those questions is to say, this process is not going to work for every adopter. While this process is working really well for us and for most adopters, this process was put in place because of non-ideal circumstances to keep us moving and to keep animals moving through our shelters and into adoptive homes. So I think it's also really important to be honest with ourselves and with the general public about the fact that, yes, if you have very special circumstances or certain needs for the animal that's coming into your home, this process may not be the right fit, and this timing might not be the right fit for bringing an animal home. So I think, while it's working super well for most people, and I don't want to belabor that point too much, but I do think that sometimes you may have some adopters call you and you may need to say, you know what, I don't think we should push this right now. Let's wait a couple months and check back in.
That's a really good point, Ashley. I just wanted to take time and pull one question from the live Q&A on the kind of flip side of this as to how staff have been reacting. But we had a question that said, are there staff members working with fosters now that weren't previously? And what type of support coaching was provided to these team members to help prepare them for working with foster families?
So we pulled in 5 staff members, one of which was helping us process foster applications. So she was someone who works at our medical center and has got an administrative background. So she already had lots of great skills in place. So it just took me having one online meeting with her, showing our process and guiding her through how to answer some questions that may be coming in from potential foster parents. And she was off and running. And then we added 4 adoption specialist case managers for staff who needed a little bit more to do. But these were staff members who, again, already kind of came primed with the skill sets that we were looking for. Great with people, great animal care knowledge. And so they already knew how to use our shelter database and all of the other things that you need to be a case manager. And basically it took me about an hour's worth of training, showing them how case management works, our case management document, talking about our communication expectations, talking through the new process with them. And they were really off and running and they were really excited actually to be able to work with foster parents. I will say the volunteers that work directly with our foster parents, we retain them for really long periods of time because I think it's such a rewarding thing to do, because you get to actually help see an animal through an adoption, which always I think feels really good for people. And so especially for our staff who have a disconnect from our animals now because we just don't have as many on site, they really liked it a lot. So I'm pleasantly surprised with how easy it was to get them up and running and how much they're actually liking doing this.
All right, Jennah, so our next question is, are any of the fosters that are participating in virtual adoptions new fosters, or are you only allowing previously trained fosters to participate?
All of our foster parents are participating in virtual adoptions. Like I said, we gave them the infrastructure and guidance, and then they also have the support of their case manager in case there are any questions. But it is a fairly simple process. So it's not something that you need a lot of training to be able to do. And again, our fosters are not acting as adoption counselors. They're acting as advocates for their animal's adoption. So answering questions about what it's like to live with the animal, nuances about things that they've discovered, toys that their animal loves, how long it took for the animal to settle in with them. Those are the types of things that they are communicating with potential adopters. And then our trained professional counselors and our trained volunteer counselors are the ones that are actually having a counseling session and helping make sure that it is indeed a good match for the animal and for the people.
I have an add-on question for you, Jennah. At what point do you add fosters to the Google groups and the Facebook groups? Are you going to be waiting for them to be matched and or wait until they have an approved application, etc.?
So once they have completed online orientation, they are added to our shelter database, which is Pet Point. They are added to our Google group and invited to our Facebook group. So we don't wait until they're matched. We just wait until they've completed the onboarding process to add them to those groups.
And then one final follow-up that we had from the live Q&A was, do we have user guidelines for the Facebook group? And then who within HRA on staff is responsible for moderating those groups?
So for the most part, we trust our foster parents to self-moderate. Do they always get it right? No, that's okay. People are human. But the guidelines is we want topics of conversation to be related to HRA fostering and HRA animal care. And so we ask them to stick to that, and we ask them to use those groups to ask questions about foster process. Hey, I just got this cat and Like somebody yesterday put up this video of a cat like scent marking all over the place, and they weren't sure if that was normal or not. And then a bunch of people told her that's totally normal. So those types of things, when people kind of stray outside of that, if it's way too far, often our foster parents will call them out on it. But for ones that are a little bit more delicate or a little bit more of a gray area, if it is kind of inappropriate, I will reach out to them individually and let them know, remind them of the usage and why we won't allow that moving forward. So, yep.
Perfect. So our next question that we had was, how do you manage physically distant adoption handoffs from foster to adopter?
I can try to tackle that one. So we are trying to empower our fosters to be as creative as they can be about this. It depends on where the foster lives and what their ability is to do these handoffs. We've found that the fosters are actually great at figuring out how to do these, but for dogs, we've found that most people are doing some sort of handoff in a fenced-in space. So in their front yard with the gate closed, they'll let the dog out into the yard, kind of wave at the adopter picks up the leash and they're on their way. Or with cats, similarly, putting the cat in a carrier, bringing it outside and kind of standing by but 6 feet away while the adopter approaches and collects the cat. So they're able to kind of see each other and talk from far away, but manage that in a way that's safe for everyone.
And we have guidelines for suggestions for how they can do handoffs on our HRA foster website on the adoptions page that kind of goes through that for our foster parents.
Hey everybody,
Perfect.
This is Alice. I'm going to jump on in real quick and ask a question. Has virtual adoptions had a positive effect on fosters? Do you feel that it has enriched the fosters' lives by not just fostering, but also being a part of the adoption process?
Well, I'm always going to say fostering enriches your life. But I think what's been really cool about this time is so many people who normally didn't engage with our organization have had a chance to really have a significant impact on the lives of our animals by fostering. They have had a direct, hands-on impact. And I can't imagine that doesn't feel enriching to people participating, even if they've only had the animal for 3 days, because we have such a quick turnaround time with animals that are available for adoption. I just think it's so cool to see how many people from our community stepped up to say yes to helping us, and they got to do it in a real physical, emotional way.
Okay, great, thank you. And what has been the average length of stay in foster homes since implementing virtual adoptions?
So I don't actually have that data, but anecdotally, I can say that my case managers, one of the things that they keep telling me is that fosters are a little sad because they thought they were going to have an animal for a longer time and have a quarantine buddy, and they end up getting adopted in like 2 or 3 days from foster. So obviously with our baby animals who are a little younger, the commitment's going to be a little bit longer for our foster parents. But I would say probably a week or less for animals who once they're available for adoptions. And like kittens, as soon as they're live on our website, foster parents immediately get, like, I'm not kidding, like 30 emails. So it's, people want to still adopt, which is really awesome. So our animals are moving through very quickly.
That's great. So have you been surprised at how the transition to virtual adoption is going, going from the, one-on-one adoption, in-person adoptions?
I think I've been surprised at how smooth the process has been. I will also say my staff has been really kicking butt, which is so exciting. Everybody's been really excited about how we've been able to get this launched, and our team has worked together really well. I think even interdepartmentally, everyone's been really cooperative and efficient and focused on teamwork and getting this stuff done, which has been really cool to see. And I think we've also seen, I think a little bit less like confusion and hesitation about this process than we thought we might. You know, I think Jennah and I were pretty prepared to fight a big battle on making this go, and found that everybody was really game and excited about it. So yeah, I've been really surprised at how smooth that transition has been. You know, of course, we've had a few setbacks along the way. We've had even some like mistakes that we've had to kind of go back and say, oh, you know, sorry to an adopter because something got messed up in the process. And, you know, so I think you do have to be prepared for some of those more minor setbacks. But in general, yes, it's been a pretty smooth transition.
And I've seen, you know, as a staff member, I've seen your department fostering volunteers and then communications work so well together to get this up and running. And we're having so many folks from all over the country reaching out to us for information. You guys are really being leaders. So here's another question. Are there process changes or improvements that have been made that you'll keep going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, is the short answer. I'm not sure which yet, because I think I think a lot of people will probably sympathize with this. It's kind of hard to envision how things are going to look in the future, right? But definitely some of the pieces that we've got going virtually have been, frankly, more efficient than what we had in person. And I know, you know, paperless adoptions were something that we always wanted to kind of throw time into moving forward, and just it kind of always got put down on the bottom of our to-do list as other more urgent things popped up, and then suddenly that became really urgent, so we were able to kind of get it moving. So yeah, I think that some of the changes that we've made will definitely continue when we move forward. You know, the morning huddle meeting has been really wonderful, and getting to see everyone's faces. You know, and that tracking document, I think, has been really crucial and wonderful for us. So definitely, I think we've been kind of shoved towards some of these things that have been proven to be really great more generally as well. But not exactly sure how that'll pan out as we move into whatever the next phase of this will be.
I'm certainly hoping that we can keep the remote adoption process for adoptions from foster. Before, it was kind of clunky and very multi-step on the adopter for going to various locations. And so I hope that will stay in place. We are certainly not going to go back to requiring our fosters to come on site for an animal care orientation. I was really kind of excited that this pushed us towards reaching that goal faster than we had planned. And we have also, I just think, I was like so scared of using like this video chat thingy, and now I've become really comfortable with it, and I can connect with my volunteers more frequently. I can connect with foster parents more easily, and I just have found a tool that I really like that allows me to connect and engage with people more. And so I certainly plan on using that more frequently for sure.
That's
Jennah,
great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Jennah, we have a couple more questions for foster specifically, some kind of operational questions. If a foster isn't willing to have their email listed on the pet's profile to do virtual meet and greets, how do you kind of handle that, or are there workarounds that you can provide?
So again, going back to the expectation setting, we do require them to be accessible to adopters via email. But we say if you don't want your personal email up there, we recommend that they create a special foster account that they plan on checking on a daily basis. And so all email traffic goes to that inbox, and they don't have to have any personally identifiable information out on the internet.
Perfect. And then one more for you, Jennah. How are you getting the information from your fosters about their foster animals to the adopter and to the adoptions counselors to ensure that it's an appropriate fit? So how are you kind of collecting that information?
Yes, we have kind of two pathways for that. One is the case manager checking in on a regular basis and entering notes into that animal's pet point record about relevant information that the foster is passing along about what it's like to live with that animal. And then the other thing is the fosters are asked to prepare adoption bios. So those photos, those videos, and those little write-ups about animals that we put on the internet, they send those to, we have a special inbox that we have a volunteer and our adoption staff that manages. So they send that information to the email address, and then volunteer and staff get that stuff up into PetPoint for adoptions marketing.
Wonderful. Ashley, we have a couple more questions for you, and then I think we'll probably wrap things up. But I think one that we had that you touched on briefly was, how are you handling dog introductions, and then maybe communicating with an adopter that now might not be the best time for them to adopt, or kind of how are you having those conversations?
Yeah, so even when we had on-site adoptions, we didn't require that people bring their dogs in for a dog intro. If they felt strongly that they wanted to do a dog introduction before they adopted, we would schedule that for them. Now that we've moved to only virtual adoptions, we're not really facilitating dog introductions. So if someone has a dog at home and their dog is just super great with every other dog they've ever met, and they're very confident that that would probably go fine, then we will just counsel them on how to do that introduction after the adoption in a way that facilitates a healthy relationship, right? So doing some parallel walking and all that kind of stuff. If they have a dog at home that's dog selective or has a history of dog aggression, or alternatively, if they are adopting a dog that has shown some dog selectivity or aggression, we will tend to counsel them out and say, you know what, this might not be the right time to adopt. I think you're right that you should do a dog intro before you adopt, and we can't do that right now. And in that conversation, obviously we want to be as friendly and kind of professional as possible about it, but we really do want to be honest and connect with someone and say, look, these are our limitations. This is what we can do and this is what we can't. And it sounds like it's really important that this happen. So I think we're just going to have to wait for now.
The other thing I just want to add is that part of our evaluation process for our dogs is an on-site dog intro. So we do have some baseline information about how we think that animal is going to react with other dogs.
That's a great point. So it looks like we're about out of time, and I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. As Jennah and Ashley mentioned, we're going to have some of these resources available published after the webcast today, and so we'll have those posted at humanerescuealliance.org. We'll have the presentation and then links to some of these forms and resources and tools available for you. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And we're happy to connect and help you any way we can. And we're really excited about the work that all of you are doing. So thank you again. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.